Good evening and welcome to the January 2nd, 2017 meeting of the Merrimack School Board. Please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And we're on to item number 2, which is public participation. If you'd like to come to the mics, please state your name and address for the record. Seeing none, we are going to close public participation and go on to item number 3, which is the formal hearing on the James Mastrocola Upper Elementary School budget for 2017-2018. I invite to the table Principal Marcia McGill and the Assistant Principal Bill Morris. Thank you for coming. Not that we gave you a choice, but we're still appreciative.
And we thank you for inviting us. Good evening. The primary focus of developing our 2017-2018 budget is to provide the adequate supplies, equipment, and materials necessary to implement the programs at James Mastrocola Upper Elementary School. Factors that are significant in this year's budget are the continuation of the purchasing of texts and instructional resources at a variety of reading levels to support literacy instruction. Also, it includes resources and materials to reinforce writing across the curriculum. We also continue to purchase materials to implement a standards-based math program. This includes instructional resources for the classroom as well as consumable student materials.
In addition, we seek to begin the replacement of the cafeteria tables. This will be the second phase of purchasing replacement tables. We also would like to replace the science room stools in our science labs for chairs. This will be the first phase of purchasing replacement chairs.
At this time, I'd like to address some questions that came to us. I'd like to start with Board Chair Barnes. The first question was about achieving a savings for grade 5 and grade 6 field trips, even though we may have fewer students and there are increases in transportation costs. And yes, there would be reduction in buses. The reconfiguration of our building will bring that about.
Regarding School Board Chair Barnes's question, the table tennis table costs $400. We currently have 6 tables with a 7th on order, and our goal is to have 12 tables.
Then we had some questions from Vice Chair Schneider. The first question was in reference to math texts and the money that we have in that account. And we are working as a math curriculum committee to revise the curriculum, and we're looking towards this winter into spring doing an evaluation of several programs, just looking at what program would be the best program for providing services to our students or math instruction to our students. We're not sure if that will be done by the end of the year. Our hope would be that it would. And if it is, and we have a new program for the fall, then those funds would go towards the purchasing of materials and resources for the new program. If not, if it's going to take us a little bit longer to finish that curriculum, then we'd be putting those funds towards the purchase of the current program that we're using until we make a final decision on a new program.
Harsha, on that one, I think there's a follow-along
Okay?
from Andy.
Yeah, we just want to know protocol, whether we were going to chime in with each one or not. So you were the first school to come before us that talked about math curriculum, and it's sprinkled across all the different schools until you get to the high school where it's not there. But from middle school on down, there's a placeholder for math text. So when you say that, I understand we've heard that the curriculum is being investigated. My comment to all is, I'm assuming it's a placeholder in case you're ready and you want to buy new books, so that'll be in place to be able to purchase those.
Definitely.
But then you said if we don't, we're going to use the funds to buy existing curriculum. All of it? A little bit of it? I mean, because my idea, my belief is and I'll let Mark chime in if he feels appropriate, is that we're going to be changing at some point. And I would hate for us to do a large investment in textbooks on the existing program if we know we're going to invest in the new program. So some clarification on your comment.
The majority of that money that's in that math budget goes towards buying student journals, which are consumed throughout the school year. There are 2 sets of journals, and so that money would need to go to the journals if we were going to continue with that program for another year. And if not, if we have a new program, then that money would go towards buying whatever those resources are, whether they're journals or text, depending on the program, we'd have that money to do that.
Okay.
Can I?
Yeah,
can
go
I
ahead.
elaborate? So there is no new investment. The only investment that will be made would be in the new program. So if we're not ready, and I don't anticipate that's the case, but if for whatever reason we're not ready, then all that would happen is what's been happening over the last several years, which is that the math money would go towards the consumable parts of the current program that we're using. That would be it.
So there's always a fund for math text and consumables in every school every year that's been flat, but in every school it's been bumped as a placeholder for this year. I'm assuming the amount that it's bumped by would not be spent on the existing program. It's all the baseline for consumables that you would normally purchase throughout a year.
That's correct.
Okay. I just want to be clear on, my expectation was that would be the case, so I just wanted to make sure that I was clearly understanding the intent. Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Regarding school board Vice Chair Schneider's question concerning the table tennis table and stationary bike, both these items would be used for the general population. And yes, there may be other opportunities to pursue for additional sources of funding for these. As this year in particular, we are purchasing one table that was made through a gift to the school. We will certainly explore other sources for helping to offset costs for things like that.
So as a follow-on, as part of I'm on the healthcare committee, where we talk about ways to get students involved and every school being able to do more to get them involved, in things. This is a perfect thing for that. But also from time to time we talk about creative ways to get funding through government programs or vendor programs or whatever. So I just sort of wanted to find out whether whenever you look at expanding, like for that kind of material, if you look at those opportunities to get funding through places other than just what we do here. So.
We certainly would be open to exploring that. And Ms. Grenier, the PE teacher, is very resourceful, in getting the things this program needs. And to address Vice Chair Schneider's question regarding whether any of the items are deemed critical or can be deferred, of the items listed in the area in question of furniture, teacher chairs, bookcases, and cafeteria tables are deferred from last year. The 4th item is a new request for science chairs, chairs in the science labs. We also deemed them necessary as well, and so for the delivery of services at the upper elementary school.
So the reason I ask is you won't be the only one to ask this question to, is that there's been a multi-year plan in place for rolling through furniture and upgrading it and stuff. But as we always find out, it's sort of like the low-hanging fruit that we go for when we have to cut funds for one particular reason. So what would be helpful when we looked at this is what are the real critical items? Because we know that the ability to weld these things together and replace goes away after a while, and there are things that you must have to do. I mean, we're doing the same approach with our budget. We're taking capital items that we know we must have, like the heat wheel at the high school, putting in the budget because we have no choice. Paving projects we put as warrants because, we want the voters to be able to chime in. The same, at least I'd like the same granularity when it comes to things like furniture. So when we're sitting up here and are asked to do it like a default budget, what do we cut? We'll know that 2 of those cafeteria table, or you want 2, one of them has no legs left on it, and the other, so we can make some more educated decisions. So it's the only reason I asked the question, but it's a repeat that you'll see with other schools. So.
Cindy, do you have a follow-on question to that?
Well, it's just along the same vein, and just a quick comment. And I wanted to point out that I liked the way in the budget where if something was deferred from last year, that it's noted as a line item, not only in the upper elementary, but in the other budgets that we're reviewing as well. It's helpful to say, okay, this is something that was cut last year, it's back in the budget. So that really helped me when I was reviewing the budget line items.
Thank you.
Marge?
The only thing I would say is that when we met as a leadership team, and this budget is crafted, if you remember, first by the individual administrators from the respective building, and then everyone comes to the leadership table. We talk as a collective. So you'll see a lot of theme repeated throughout as compared to variation. So I would say number one for all of us is the restoration of the deferred items, because you can't go forward with a plan until you get what you deferred. So we didn't add too much to it. On the other hand, in just a side conversation with Marcia, one of the things that she talked in terms of is perhaps giving up a cafeteria table because the ones in place are functioning. It's just that they're heavy and, we want to get into round tables and so on. But that could be off-put. So those are the kinds of discussions we have. So if you ultimately say there are some cuts that need to be made, then what we do is go back as a collective and talk all together. To look across the board to say, of all the items we put in here, what are the ones that we could just put off for another year? I think the replacement plan, though, is terribly important, because if you keep putting it off and putting it off, you never accomplish your objective. And at some point in time, and I think they could tell you their inventory, we're hoping to be done. I mean, like, we will have marched ourselves through all the classrooms. So we're not that far off, I don't believe, for you. I think we're in pretty good shape. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I was thinking about that the other day as I went through all of them. Because we get under pressure a lot of times to make these sort of cuts, that's why the critical versus, I know you've got a 5-year plan or a multi-year plan usually, but it may cause us to take a step back and say, do we extend the plan, do it over a longer period than a shorter period? And if we as a board are made aware of the things that are more critical, like, you've got 28 stools or whatever the number was, you must have 15 because they're not staying anymore. So we would know that we wouldn't recommend cutting the entire item, but maybe a part of it if we needed, as an example. So that would be helpful.
So I think this is such a give and take, and it's like dialoguing. And I think what I would request of the board is the opportunity to be able to work with a team to come back to you to say this would be kind of our best thought. Because sometimes economy of scale would say you try and buy all the schools at once because you get a better deal than if you parsed it out 3 ways. Another time you say, well, you know what, those stools are going to go into 2 rooms, so I'll just furnish 1 room and not the other. So there is a lot of detail to it that I suppose could be said here, but sometimes perhaps better that we just go off and then come back and share with you. So boards have been very good to us in the past, and this one too, to be able to have those who put it together. It's like building something, and then if you have to do takeaways, to say, we need you to go back and find approximately X, and then we go back as a team and really pull it apart. But do it, and do it too, this is an important thing, we talk across the board. So it's not just the elementary sitting by itself. The middle and the high school and the directors know what's going on too. And they'll offer up, they'll play critical friends and say, well, what about? So to me, that's a wonderful learning experience as well for all members of our team.
Cinda, and then Andy?
Yeah, I would just say that what we've done the last couple of years where we've had the tier kind of suggestions, I feel like that accomplishes that intent, where you're looking at what are the real critical things, even though it may not seem critical, maybe it's in the tier 3 cut versus the tier 1 or tier 2. So I feel like, if we take that approach again this year, as we get, in the next couple weeks, that's really helpful.
Andy?
Yeah, I was going to agree, except that I would like to add a little spice to that, because when we look at these sort of tiering, one of the things that we were looking at, especially when you got to like tier 3, I think it was, you started intermixing capital items with things that might potentially impact programs and stuff like that. At least for me, I want to make the cuts on the capital things, the physical things rather than the program things. So understanding the granularity about the stability of the tables and some of those things that you can physically touch versus, I mean, I rely on this is my personal view, I rely on the school administration to do the job when it comes to educating our kids as far as programs and books and all that kind of stuff. Where I can be more heavy-handed maybe is pushing back on the physical things like, the tables or things that you can really talk about. So I really that's where I want more granularity, not across the board, but those physical kind of things that we could go look at or things like that. That's the reason. So, when you see the tiering, making sure that it's the physical things that are near the front, and also understanding the thought behind why you're cutting it, versus a whole group of tables versus partial tables or things like that. Granularity, so we make sure that we're using a scalpel as opposed to a machete to do some of these cuts. So that's my only request, having been down this block a few times before. So.
And the one thing as I'm listening to this dialogue, I wanted to pipe in on is, we've always been a committed conversation about not kicking the can. This year was unique, and we didn't have a choice but to kick the can because the voters asked us to. So we are here where we are. We do have 5-year furniture replacement plans, but it's not like our bonded debt where it's going to go away and we know that it's paid for. It's a depreciable asset that's going to have to be replaced. So it's a 5-year due replacement. But then I'm not saying it's going to come right away that another 5-year plan will come in place, but there will be. I just don't want us to create decisions short-term that are going to create long-term come to a head and say, well, now we have things that have been welded one too many times, and now we have too many stools to replace, too many microscopes to add, and that we are putting a future board where it all comes to a head and becomes their burden and not at our, from our hand. So I want us to make sure we're keeping a very careful eye on what we're asking. We know we want to get to a bottom line. We don't want to do it at a future board's expense and at a building operational expense. So that where they have to make some real ridiculous decisions just to make things work because we may have asked a little too much. So I think we just want to make sure as we're talking that we set the expectation that we want to balance struck that we're not going to make a decision where we're forcing their hand to kick the can on our behalf. So that's just one thing I want to make very clear from my perspective, and I am one vote. So, and I'd say barely one voice tonight. So, but I just want to put that out there. So I know other schools will be coming to us, but I want to kind of set the tone from my expectation. So I'm sorry I interrupted you.
No.
I think you have some more questions as well.
Thank you for your comments. We had one final set of questions that came from Board Member Thompson. The first one was in reference to science instructional equipment repairs. The question was why the cost at $280 in 15-16 brings us a request this year of $500. That repair account is for repairing our balances, our pan balances, and our microscopes that are used in our science program. We alternate that repair on those items. So, for example, last year in 2016, it was the balances. In 17, it will be the microscopes. So depending on what the repair is and what the cleaning is that's needed, those costs can change. So if you look back over a series of our 13 years, you'd probably see the majority of that has been spent has been around $500. We've had some leaner years. It just depends on what needs to be repaired and what needs to be cleaned or calibrated when it comes to the balances. So that's a per item cost, so we don't know that until we actually get that done. Then I think there was a question in reference to that about, do we use the same individual? And for the last couple years we have, but unfortunately that person has passed, and so we're in the process of looking for possibly one of the science teachers at the high school who might be able to do that summer work for us. And the same person that we've used these past couple years we believe was used by the middle school also. I think the high school has always done their own type work, but we have that done every year to make sure that equipment is in good repair. There was another question in reference to what is the factor in the decrease in the supply account for science from 15-16 to the 17-18 budget, and that's a decrease in population. In our 15-16 budget, our population per student cost for science was 583 students, and this year it's 542 students. So at a per student cost, that would decrease that amount. And then the last question was in reference to the social science texts, which are really atlases. We had some atlases we were using in 5th grade that were dated back. We have some that are maybe about 86. We have some about 2000 or 2003. This is in 5th grade where we teach history, discovery of the New World, the Silk Routes and what brought all that discovery about. So we've been able to pretty much use those atlases, but we really want to bring them up to a more current date at this time. We have replaced the 6th grade atlases. They are 2013s, so we'd be looking at something that would be a 16 or a 17, but we feel that it would be important to have all of our 5th grade atlases being the same the teachers are instructing from. So those are the questions that were given to us ahead of time. If you have any questions at this time, we'll be happy to try to answer them.
Are there any other supplemental questions or comments from the board?
I just want to make a comment on, thank you for that information. I just wanted, obviously, everybody else to understand why the difference is in quite a few line items with the population change and just have that called out. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Excellent. So no other questions or comments from the board? We missed nothing from administration? So I think you're off the hook.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Have a good new year. So, and as I organize, bear with me, we're on to item number 4, which is a formal hearing on technology library media budget from our director, Nancy Rose. Welcome, Nancy.
Happy New Year, everybody. Hope everybody had a good break. So my budget this year is really a focus on kind of continuing with plans in place to improve infrastructure and to continue with the library program, and also to look at the restoration of things that happened with it. It was. Is it too far away? There we go. Sorry about that. Maybe my book is in the wrong place. So the budget this year will look at continuing with the plans for improving our technology, the infrastructure and classroom technology, as well as the library budget, the maintenance of that, and then restoring the items that were cut for the default budget. One thing that we've been striving to do is to take advantage a little bit, to Ms. Barnes' point, to build up where we've been able to with the capital improvement plan to get our computer life a little bit shortened. It had been in excess of 10 years, and we're getting that cut down a little bit. So to try to maintain that, as well as we've increased the number of computers by a lot. We've added a lot of laptops. We've added carts to the different schools. The middle school this year just getting carts that they have in the different teams. So trying to both keep that replacement cycle moving and increasing the devices that we have for kids. There's obviously a software increase. That's because we have more required, things that people are requesting, subject area, more in data and different things that we're using in the back for systems. And then maintaining the library program with a real strong focus on, literacy, fostering a love of reading, which is critical. Research skills and information skills. And then in the last couple of years, we've also been really looking at how to do more integration so that the information and technology skills are part of core curriculum. So a real programmatic approach. So that's kind of my general overview, and then I have some questions to review. From Chairman Barnes was a question about addressing the supply and demand of bandwidth that we're experiencing regarding internet access and Wi-Fi, and will these infrastructure improvements meet current and future demands? This is of the infrastructure budget. I was going to combine that with a question from Mr. Thompson about wanting to know about the need for cabling and switching, and about whether or not wireless is an option for that. The cabling and switching that we've been doing is replacing cabling that in many cases has been there for 20 years or more, and the protocols change, so the actual cable physically has to be upgraded to be able to keep up with ongoing speeds. And then, of course, so it breaks down into 10 megabyte speeds, 100 megabyte speeds, and then gigabit, and it keeps going up from there. And there's just cutoff points where old cabling or distances of old cabling just won't do. So we've been working on replacing the cabling and the switches and adding wireless access points, which are fed by the cabling. So we can only get as fast as we can get based on what the core infrastructure in the walls is or in the closets. The other thing that we were able to do this year is to change our internet service provider, and they also are our phone service provider. We are switching to a model where we have a fiber connection between the Ferry schools and the high school, as well as the middle school and the high school. We have a connection from Muse to the high school that we've had in place for a while, but we did not have a good connection, a fast connection from the Ferries in the middle school back to the high school up until a few years ago. So with this change, we've increased our bandwidth and are doing it in a build towards what's called dark fiber, so that over time we can take back ownership of that. So we're building in a build cost that at the end of a certain amount of time, once the builds are all done and paid for, we can then make an option if we want to run that ourselves, change the agreement, change the service arrangement. And we'd be responsible for management and equipment and troubleshooting, but it provides the opportunity to own infrastructure as opposed to just paying for a service, which is what we've been doing. So, and that will grow. That makes it so it's very scalable. It's fiber, so it grows.
I want to, if I could, just add in a little background so you know exactly what Nancy's saying, because this has been something that's been near and dear to my heart for around 16, 17 years now. Getting the remote schools, Thornton's Ferry, Reed's Ferry, the middle school, onto fiber. We had gotten into discussions with the town with this number of times, number of years ago, and nothing came to fruition. So when Nancy came in with a few gentlemen who had a plan to get it done, and we met in my office, I had them repeat it around 3 or 4 times so I could make sure that I was actually hearing what I was hearing. So for me, and for not just for me, but for the district, this is an excellent opportunity to finally get the fast bandwidth to those schools that we definitely need for the programs, because they were always kind of lacking behind a little bit because of the point-to-point T1 situations that we had. So what she's done is build in the infrastructure, actually put the fiber on the poles, having direct connection. It's a great thing, and I'm just satisfied that I've been here long enough to actually see it happen. So I'm very happy with that. So thank you, Nancy.
Thank you. That was very nice of you to say. Just as a point of reference, when I got here, the elementaries and the middle school were at 2.5 mega service, and we just went to 500. So, which is in keeping with expectations for what schools should have. So,
Andy?
Just really quick, obviously you're building the core of that infrastructure coming out of the high school that feeds the rest of the buildings. Is there enough room in the high school for any expansion we need to do as we grow this out?
Yeah, because it replaces old equipment. We,
Okay.
yeah, it's fine.
The only
They
reason
expanded the closet
Yeah,
before I got here.
Yeah, a few years ago, we expanded the size of the closet. We also put in a secondary split air conditioning system, because
Yeah.
there only used to be one. And that one had a little issue during a week or so when it got up to 100 degrees in there. And so we have 2 split air conditions, and we actually increased the size of that room, doubled it since.
The only reason I ask is, and at the time when you're building the infrastructure out, is when we did our space analysis of all the buildings, we found that JMU's was probably the least populated, least dense as far as all the schools. And my only comment was, over time, as we really grow this out and become self-sufficient with the dark fiber and everything else, is there enough room in the current structure in the high school to handle your grand ultimate in-game view? Or do we need to look at a place where there's more expansion room to build it out?
The high school is actually the least of our concerns. I would say the elementary schools are probably a bigger concern because they simply are not equipped with space to do this. And so we have racks, secured racks that are in classrooms, the labs, which we don't really have an option. You're dealing with old buildings. The other thing that I think would be important to know is that as we do this, we build up redundancy so that we have servers and switching and, systems in place so that we're failing over to the different sites. It's not just the high school is our main point, but it isn't the only. So we do have presence in all the buildings.
Michael, you had a follow-on question?
Thank you for answering part of my question. I guess for me, I might feel more comfortable if I understand that there should be a reduction in infrastructure as more is going to wireless. I'm not sure if that's been done in the past already and it's just part of it, but one of the things with like the switch upgrades, are we actually minimizing switches as we advance in technology, or are you seeing kind of just a replacement?
Well, we're
of
not.
exactly what you're having?
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Well, we're not going wireless with desktop computers like the teachers are still using, or for the phones. We can't go wireless for the phones, for the IP phone system. So we still have to have jacks to every classroom, and so those are the jacks that we're upgrading. And then we're also upgrading the cabling and the ceilings that goes to the access points. And then all of the access point connections and phone connections and all of those still go back to an infrastructure. So we aren't really adding jack space necessarily, but we do have to upgrade that to be able to keep up with the speeds.
So it's more of the technology that you're using doesn't allow for it at this point. To kind of go to the wireless.
The buildings also, to really fully do each building in fully saturated wireless with cinder blocks and also rod through the cinder blocks, that it's actually, that would be a very large undertaking.
Okay.
So we do the best that we can with the wireless, but with like day-to-day computing and running of systems and phones and things like that, hardwiring is really the best way to go.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate that.
Did I answer that full question?
Yeah, you
Because
did.
wireless is for certain things, but to try to run everything on that would be
No, yeah, I wouldn't
very
expect
difficult.
everything, but
Yeah.
kind of making sure that it's being viewed, which seems like you guys
Oh,
are
yeah.
doing a very good job.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you.
Yeah, my question was off the lines of I know a lot of students are using the wireless. I mean, they're bringing their phones in, they're taking pictures of the homework boards and texting themselves, whatever.
It has been a
so-
challenge, I will say.
That's really, I know that they're using it. I know teachers will use it on their iPads and stuff like that. So that's what I'm saying. With everyone having a piece of the action with mobile devices, does the infrastructure that you're doing, is it going to be able to keep up at this point based on what you're doing?
Yeah. Well, and as we get into, I'll get to the software question and I'll answer that a little bit more.
You know what? I'm patient. Okay. Thank you.
So a big change of gears. The next question was from Andy Schneider about the reduction last year. So it was the $15,000 reduction in the book line last year, the negative impacts of that, and then are there impacts that justify putting it back in, and what are the benefits of that? The big thing is that we still rely on books for the teaching and learning, and especially for research, instruction, and reading as for interest. And when we cut that out last year, a lot of what took a hit were fiction and high interest series that are a big draw for kids, especially reluctant readers and boys. So we actually had to cut in those areas. And then as we upgrade curriculum, we try to keep the informational text in step with what they're doing in the classroom. This is a nice opportunity to point out that we have, I think, one of the only centralized library programs in a school district in the state at this point, where we collect centrally, the librarians all have input, and we process centrally, and then the collection floats. So as different schools take on different subject areas or need different reading levels, we can move the materials around. And with different curricular initiatives, the library frequently is, a core source for how they keep up to date with what they're teaching kids. So when we don't have the funds that we've had, then those things are the currency and the high interest are the things that take a hit, because that's where we tend to be collecting actively. The other thing, I think there's always a kind of a question about, our books of the past, and they're not. There's still nothing, for a lot of kids, that reading of a physical text is a very important thing. And it's tactile, there's a lot to that. And the other thing is with our technology, we have more technology than we did, which is fabulous. But we don't right now have enough that we could go completely digital with, say, research. So, there are times when there just isn't enough technology around to get to that point. So, we're at a point where we're in both worlds. I think there's value to both worlds. There's still a need to understand how informational texts work in physical form, as well as, and it's also a way of understanding how information is organized. So there's a lot to it, and I just, that's the impact of that, is that we lose that ability, or it's reduced. And the series are a big deal, and they're very popular right now, series books. So
Yeah, that's exactly what I needed to know, because on the surface, we survived last year with less money. The question is, what was the impact of it? And when you talked about, books versus the online stuff, the same as Mike's question about, all the switching that's needed, even though we're going more wireless. Well, there's still a baseline you have to maintain that's still there. Even though the technology to online is changing, you've just described how for readers that need to be able to read, like the tactile feel, and it still helps and still has a value. So for me, that getting that out was the important part, because just on the surface you say, oh, we cut 15,000 last year, we didn't die, right?
Right.
1,500, right?
15,000.
Oh,
15,000.
Okay.
Right, it was a big number. That's the reason I asked.
It's a district-wide book
Right,
budget. so-
right, exactly.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was thinking that.
And you'll notice I have the same questions when it comes to like software and other things like that. What did you lose by the least amount, by reduction in budget to require you to bring it back to where it was before? So
Well, and on that note, moving on, the next question was periodicals. Oh, I'm sorry, did you? didn't see.
I just had a more of a statement, and this is general to like all the schools, and I think I've made it before during another meeting, is that if there was an area within the site that actually lists, you talk about the series books, my kids are buying them, all this stuff. If there's a way to like have a list of donations of maybe series that you guys might be looking to supplement on the website, maybe parents that have bought them before that the kids have already read through them might actually be willing to give them to school. Might be an option to kind of just put it out there that, hey, these are the ones that we might be interested in. If you have them, you want to donate them, we would greatly appreciate it. So
Okay.
just areas within each school's wish list, I guess, basically online, saying, hey, this is something that we'd be looking for.
Okay.
Just a thought. Thanks.
Thank you. So Andy's next question was the periodical budget. It was reduced last year down to 2,000 from 3,000. Along the line of the books, this periodicals, especially high interest for reluctant readers. Again, it's a short form. Things like dirt bike, motocross, dance, sports. The things that for a reluctant reader they will get into because it's of interest. Fishing, hunting and fishing are big too. And we also have been reducing, this is a line that's been going down, but we're kind of down at a point where it cuts to the core. We've been starting to cut out some of the professional journals, and there's some things that are becoming available in the license databases, which are part of the software budget, but sometimes you don't get the images, or all of the graphics don't come through. So there's trade-offs there. The other the other thing that we did this year was we didn't subscribe to any newspapers, and that was noticed. And normally every school gets at least the Telegraph, if not both that and the Union Leader. And we were getting the Boston Globe, but over the years, as this line has gone down, those have been reduced. But this last year we didn't do any. I think in the high school, the student council, I might be making this up, but there is a newspaper available in the school that's being provided by one of the student groups, but it's not part of the library. So, did you have something to say?
Yeah, sorry, one second. There is a newspaper club that puts out a periodical every 2 months or so. That's not associated with the library and doesn't go under. It doesn't. You don't have to subscribe to it. Was that your comment?
No, well, somebody in one of the student groups, I think, was paying for a newspaper subscription, but I think it just comes into the main office. I'm not sure that it's part of the library.
Yeah,
So,
I don't know. We didn't talk
Like
about
the
that.
Telegraph.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
I've seen them in the office, so I assume that
Yeah.
they come from somewhere.
So,
Yeah, because
Thank
you're
you,
referring to
though.
the Hawk, right?
To the what?
The Hawk?
Yeah, the Hawk.
Yeah, sorry, from New York. Sorry. Okay, go ahead.
so the next question from Mr. Schneider was about software, very similar setup. Impacts of the reduced budget. Can you provide examples of where the increases are coming? This is a line that has grown a lot. And then more idea of what is actually involved in that budget, just more itemization of that. With the cuts last year, we reduced some of the video streaming and canceled a couple of the research databases. Those I would actually prefer to bring back. One of the databases was one, we cut it because it was new to us and then found out that there were teachers that were using it. Sometimes the usage statistics don't necessarily tell the full story. Also, we benefited this year from staggered licensing, where there's certain things, especially security certificates or antivirus, where we can pay for multiple years at once and get a reduced cost. So then you have a year where it's not there. And a couple of those hit this year. The request from teachers for content area tools and databases, especially in science and math, just continues to grow. I think there's ways that they can just approach topic areas that just is more dynamic. And then as we add devices, it adds licensing, it adds seats. So these are all things that kind of march the incremental growth up. And then back to your question about the devices, device management is becoming something that we want to investigate for next year, because it's not cheap, but I don't know if you've ever walked into an environment, a lot of universities use it, where you walk in with your device and then you've got to go through a little process that it's like your end user agreement, if not a little kind of a certification that you're not bringing something into the environment like a virus. And they're expensive, but it may be the way that we need to go, because just managing the devices and the tracking the demand, we have some granularity and ability to ratchet down the different kinds of things that are being done, but we could inadvertently be impacting instruction. And so as we're scaling down what we run on servers, we need to do more with managing the devices that are coming in. And then
Wait, Michael, you had a question on that part?
I just want to make a comment that actually covers my question that's coming up on the next page. So you don't have to reiterate what I think you just went through. So I appreciate that.
the breakdown of the list?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because you kind of went through some of the items that you're bringing in and stuff like that. So I'm good with your
Okay.
answer, so you don't have to repeat it. That's all.
Well, it was actually Andy's question as well.
Well, I thought you were answering Andy, so
So-
I want to make sure that
Well,
you didn't have to go back.
his was multi-part, and
Yeah.
it coincided.
Okay,
with yours.
perfect.
Well, I thought so I did my homework. What I thought might be useful to share is that I broke it down roughly by where we tend to spend the bulk of that account. About 42% goes to like district level systems, and that it would be like our Microsoft, Adobe, Schoology, the core big systems. About 10% is elementary level, and that's, well, I actually could just read it, I wrote it down, and video services at the district level, and the library management system. And then at the elementary level, it's the research databases. They only have a few that are at that level. Literacy programs, online books, online reading and writing tools, some data management systems that are aimed at the elementary level, and then also different systems for skill building, and opportunities for them to work on different content area skills. And then about 40% is at the secondary level, and that's, again, a lot more research databases that's leaning more into what they're going to experience in a higher ed environment. Subject-specific applications, as I was referring to, especially in math and science and English. Guidance, there's been development of Naviance and more ability for the guidance department to interact with the universities. Credit recovery system. And then at the system level, I differentiated this from the district because this is more like technology operations. That's about 8%. And this is an area that I think is going to be growing. And this would be the spam, virus, antivirus, filtering, security certificates, our asset and help desk management, our ticketing system for the maintenance department, Wi-Fi management. So all of these things, like as we take them on, they all incur a licensing cost. So, but I just thought that might be useful to just see how that kind of breaks down.
I appreciate that. I think that details that line item a little bit more. And it's a larger one compared to some of the other ones that we'll view as individual
it's kind
items.
of a bucket.
So it is, but I think that detail definitely helps not only myself, but anybody else that might be interested in that information. So thank you.
Good.
Yeah, and while she's doing what her healthy stuff over here, it's helpful that when we look at the individual schools, one of the things we don't see is really the software or the things that are used that get captured in yours. So this is really helpful to get an idea of the percentage of the budget that goes to supporting the schools as we go through this. So.
Okay. Another question from Mr. Schneider. Provide high-level detail of each school regarding, this is my additional equipment line. What are the focus areas, or what should they be? This is like projectors versus interactive technology. Given that this is a multi-year process, what would the gaps be? This is an account. This was not part of the capital improvement plan, so there really isn't a plan per se. The goal really is to work with the buildings, and the teachers, and to really look at what suits the building, what suits the needs of that level, that instructional level. And so I took a look. This last year and the year before was a big push for document cameras, especially in the middle school, which didn't do some of the other interactive things that the lower grade levels did. And we, I think, are getting close to being saturated with everybody that wants document cameras in the classroom having them. There's more interest in the high school, and so I'm working with the departments to find out where they would like to have those. And they're kind of one of those, they replace an overhead, but they do so much more, and so they're finding a lot of different and innovative ways to use those. They're for interactivity, rather than doing the name brand board that you had in your question. We've been using a bar that's an infrared bar that essentially turns any whiteboard into an interactive surface, and then it comes with software, kind of like the smart boards do. But there's been some of the schools, especially the pre-K to 4 schools, have been using those and getting to know those well, but they have a learning curve. The upper elementary has a stronger interest in iPads, and they do a lot more just with the laptops. And the elementaries use them as well, but they all kind of do different things. They take on different approaches. All of the schools have iPads. Many were provided by Special Ed and Title I, so they're sort of limited use for general ed. Some buildings have made a point of getting an iPad into the hands of every teacher that they can then use as a center. There's just a ton of variety, and so with this line item, I really seek to work with the schools and find out what it is that they're seeking to do. This is also an area where they can be innovative and look at new things. So we've been able to do some of the robotics, the dash and dot. There's a new thing that we've been using in the elementaries called Osmo that allows you to take an iPad and interact with objects and pictures, and that you can make lessons that you can upload and share. And I've seen those become very engaging, and for older kids, they actually make the lessons. And so it allows them to take an iPad and turn it into something a lot more interesting. So that last year at this time, I'd never heard of it. So there's a lot of growth in these areas, and so I like to just allow the innovation to kind of continue.
I just had a question regarding the Mimeo. Is that something that's still being used and still relevant?
That's the Teach Bar. That's that
those are
bar.
the bars. Okay.
Yeah. It's another brand name, but they do the Teach Bar, and they also do a clicker kind of a system. And we also, the other thing, along with the library program that I think is good to know, is that as we have technology available, we move it around. So the robots move around, the different Mimeo things move around as teachers experiment. And so having it in the district allows different teachers to kind of find out, and then a building might want to go in a direction. So I think we're unique that way. Another question from Mr. Schneider for infrastructure. This was about classroom computers, and this also overlaps with a question that Michael Thompson raised about the number of computers. And so I just wanted to talk about that a little bit. I have my little sheet here. This is kind of what I do to do a rough tracking of what we replace when, so that we can kind of plan out. And to restate, when I first came, we didn't have a replacement plan in place for any technology, and many computers were in their 10th to 14th year of life. numbers of them were donated in their 6th to 7th year of life. And so it's been arduous, and I know it's been costly, but we've been working very hard to move ourselves up so that teachers are not held back. They were held back very much, and students were too. And so we're finally getting to the point between the computers and the networking where things are actually keeping up. And the demand's growing, so it's not like we can get here and just wipe our brows and say we're done. But so I added up what we have across the schools between staff and students. This is a mix of laptops and desktops. And what we have added as opposed to replaced. But we're now at about 1,700 computers. And that number is probably a little shy because I'm not thinking of every single office. And I didn't do this from our inventory system because that, has a whole other set of challenges. But if we were to do 1,700 computers, even at a 7-year replacement cycle, that's 245 computers a year. And if I were to average a cost between laptop, desktop, monitor, and everything, I think reasonable, but at about $500, that's $122,000 a year. So it just gives you a space and time to know that if we look at changing the way we do the replacement cycle, we will extend that year back out. So we're now finally getting to where machines are not staying with us longer than 7 years. But if we tinker with the plan for that, that number will stretch back out. So it is an area that's big, but it's an area that, I don't know of many businesses that would stay with a 7-year replacement cycle. And this, to me, compared to where we were, feels very generous. And so, that's kind of the place and time where we are. And I feel very, very good, and I'm very grateful to the board and your predecessors that have allowed us to get where we've gotten, because we have grown as well as replaced. And so I do feel very fortunate, but anything that we lose will be a step back to the longer terms.
So interestingly enough is, having been in the computer business for a while, I understand the need to rotate these things through, but the interesting part is that at our company, the refresh cycle for laptops used to be 2 to 3 years because, that's the technology changes. That's extended. Now the recycle, even in the computer industry, is now up to 5 because the core technology of these machines isn't changing as nearly dramatically as it used to. So while I still believe we certainly need to recycle some of these old ones out, it'll be interesting over time to see if that cycle holds true, that you just, 7 years as being the accurate amount, if that changes. Now, a lot of it is reliability of the machines over time and things like that. But as you move maybe more to things like, one of the opportunities is as you move more into the dark fiber, you can go maybe into more of a workstation model where you can have more diskless sort of systems that teachers would use and things like that, and having more solid state stuff that on desks, which may make things last longer. So it'll be curious to hear you report back, whether I'm on the board or not, as to how the technology changes, and how maybe we can invest and keep these things longer. But I agree that the cycle that you've got now makes sense given where we are and what you've got in the schools. So.
Well, and we're just arriving at it. So
Right.
It isn't that it's been in place. We're just
No, right,
getting there. Yeah.
exactly. Right.
We have been with our laptops as much as we can. We've been putting in solid state drives to try to keep the life cycle going on those. The other thing is with a lot of this technology, so many of the companies are producing for schools, and they're producing in massive volumes. And so inevitably what we're finding is that we'll invest in a model, and then we may have anybody that has computers knows that you have failures. But when you have 150 of something, a failure across that many is troubling. So we're trying to make sure that as we invest in things that we're getting things that are going to last. And it feels kind of like a constant juggling game to make sure that everything is economical but durable. And then the wear and tear with kids using them and going in and out of carts and all of the things that go with that. It's a challenge, but I like that they're using it. It's fabulous to go see. So,
Michael, did you have another question along those lines?
Yeah, I was wondering if you have any detail on the difference between what you're paying, what you're using the funds for to expand the computers versus what you're actually using to maintain?
It varies year to year, so.
Just like, yeah.
Just looking at the numbers year to year, since I started doing this, so this is this year, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The first year was solely replacement, then we've added carts. Most of the additions have been carts of laptops. So we added, we replaced carts at the upper elementary and added there. And then we added the elementaries, each got 2 carts, the pre-K to 4 schools did. The middle school just got 5 carts this year. Last year, the high school got 5 carts. So most of it has been in carts of laptops for student use. Otherwise, we've been either replacing lab computers, which are still heavily used, or staff machines. And then adding is very incidental.
Not a lot for maintenance of existing ones, more just
well, we've
expanding.
been upgrading the staff computers and lab computers as well. Okay. So as we do this, we're trying to balance maintaining the desktops as well as putting in mobile devices.
Maybe I can, when I'm saying maintain, actually keeping the ones in cycle and actually paying to get them fixed or stuff like that.
Oh, we have technical staff that does that. Yeah, I mean, what we have, our machines now, I just did a cursory number. I've got, out of the 1,700, right now I still have more than 400 that are over the 7-year life cycle. So we're this year trying to get that number down. Yep. So, yeah, I will say we squeeze every last penny out of these machines, and I think Matt would agree. we squeeze a lot of life out of these computers, and I feel very, very fortunate that we were able to add a technician. I think that we're at a point, we manage a lot of computers with a very small staff, and especially as they get older and require more service, that becomes an issue. So it's kind of a balancing act. So,
how many staff do you have maintaining 1,700 computers?
I have 1 network administrator and 2 full-time technicians.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much.
Are there any other questions so far?
Come visit.
And do you have any more questions left from?
No, I think that was the end of my questions. Did anybody feel that they were not heard?
The cloud computing for servers?
Oh, you're right.
Because I know that you brought over failover, and I'm actually a strong proponent for cloud computing, because cloud can actually allow for failover versus us building our infrastructure.
Oh, and there was also a membership question. My apologies. Oh. So your question was server upgrades and then alternatives such as cloud. There are some things that we run internally simply because the way the systems are designed, we can't put them out on the cloud, like our core systems like PowerSchool, BudgetSense. Certain parts of Exchange we've chosen to keep local. But like with our Exchange service, we run our mailboxes off of the 365 environment. This spring we're planning to migrate a lot of file storage up to the 365 environment, which is cloud-based. Our library system is a cloud-based. We don't run that anymore locally. So it kind of varies on the system, which way we can do it. Sometimes it makes sense to run it as a cloud, sometimes it doesn't. But what we tend to be running internally are management. So the antivirus, the software, the filtering, the asset management, things like that. Those are just locally hosted systems, and domain controllers, login servers, things like that. So those things won't go away. So, and then, was that all? Did I answer that?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. And then the last question was on the memberships, and it was regarding the 15-16 budget year, because it did jump, and we did add a membership. And that's the Consortium of School Networking, and that's a national organization that I'm certified through. And that is, they do a lot with policy, cutting edge technology, like what's coming for educational technology, a lot of support for big issues like privacy initiatives, things like that. They do a lot of white papers. So they've been a very useful organization. And there's now a group of us in the state that meet as a part of that organization. So that was all I had. Were there any more?
We've had a running dialogue with follow-on, so I figured I would. Are there any other questions or comments from the board? I had one, and I think it's something that I just want to kind of reiterate, and it's been the philosophy that you have provided that, we are very excited about technology. A lot of us work in technology space, and you understand exactly, the passion that you come to work with every day, because it's what we're exposed to professionally in the public sector or private sector. That being said, I think you've always been one that introduces technology, makes it available, but doesn't force it upon people. And that's important because, again, we want to invest in technology and make it an investment in education. But for those who are not integrating it or feel that it's going to integrate well because we're forcing a specific technology on them, we don't. So it's just been something that, that's been an open and collaborative environment to learn more about what's available, as you were talking about earlier. But, technology is best when it's in use and not I think you've used the term paperweight before.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something that's always been, it's a cultural management, not just a machine management in your space. And that's why as we were talking about machines, and are they expanding a lot? Maybe not, because there are those that just aren't finding that technology is going to work for their subject area. So I think you've been very good about that and just keeping the dialogue open. So wanted to kind of bring that forward.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I think you are now off the hook. And we have item number 5, which is a formal hearing on special services with John Fabrizio, our director.
Sorry for my books, they come
You
with
brought the big
my
book.
field. Well, Happy New Year, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to present my budget for the 17-18 school year. I'll begin by a little overview of the special services budget, and then I have questions from Chair Barnes, Vice Chair Snyder, and Board Member Thompson. And I'll address those, but if there's anyone else that has questions, please feel free at that time to answer them. So as I begin each time I think I sit in front of the board, I talk about 2 regulations that guide my work every day and guide the work of special services, and those are free and appropriate education and also least restrictive environment. And I talk often about those, and I think with free and appropriate education, it really is that we have to have that all students have the right from 3 to 21, if they're identified with a need, to an education. And where that has to happen is in the least restrictive environment, which we have an obligation to start within our classrooms in our schools. And then from there, look at what programming, what needs we can help supplement into those programs to help make them successful. And if not, look at alternative programs within our school and then outside of our schools. And that's really, that's about as brief as I can be with those 2 regulations, but I think I've gone on multiple times in front of the board and showed you PowerPoints and pieces around that, but I think just that's the start of it. And that's the basis that happens about why we have the budget we have. And it all happens within teams, and it happens with decisions of multiple educators and family members and outside agencies coming together to decide what do these students need and how can we help them. And that's really how it all begins and builds from there. And I am an overseer of that, and I put that all together to try to bring it together to say, here it is. And this is what we're projecting in the next almost a year from now with kids that may be disabled, that may have needs, that may move into our district, that may move out of our district. This is a good projection on what we feel we need for the year to come. So there's a lot of projection in this budget, and it's important we know that because a lot happens within the team-based of IEP teams that happen when we're developing for kids. So overall in our budget, the good thing is we've seen a steady decrease in numbers of kids who've been identified over the years that I've been in this position. And I think that if we go back and we look at 2012-13, we had 685 kids, 13-14, 680, 14-50, 676, 15-16, 665, And then we're currently, right now, at about 663. So it's kind of where we are. And we're seeing that steady kind of, which is really nice to see. We're maintaining our percentage of kids that are disabled, and we're actually going down a little bit. And we're also, that means that we are in a good place where that's happening. It's stable. The stable thing about that is with my budgeting, I can say it's pretty stable, and there's a trend on that. And I can look at those trends and projections coming off of that. So we look through the budget to keep in mind these are projections, again, as I said. We have, in the past year, we've had students move in. We've had some that have progressed more readily than we've hoped. They have come from out-of-district programs back into our buildings, and we've had those that haven't progressed as we hope and may need more than we're providing and moved out to out-of-district placements. So it's been kind of a flow back and forth, and that's a typical year that happens within our special ed office and special services office. Overall, my budget reflects a 3.5% increase this year. And there is a few reasons why. One is our continued plan for our multi-year plan for split air conditioning systems in some of our schools, and these systems are used to meet the needs of some of our medically fragile children. We've talked about this prior at the board about how these systems we've used in the past are basically wall units that are mobile, that we put in and out of walls. They're not cost effective. They don't really work incredibly well. They take an amazing amount of time from our maintenance staff to maintain them. A split air conditioning system is much more efficient. It fits into our Honeywell system. I've worked very closely with Tom Tuso to investigate this, and we have 4 or 5 systems in place right now with these classrooms that are working very effectively, and we hope to continue that. This was one of the items, these split air systems that were cut last year out of our budget, and we're hoping to add that in and still maintain our 5-year plan. So I'll be looking this year at the upper elementary school and Thornton's Ferry to put in units in those buildings. You'll also see an increase in our bus transportation across the board. That's in all of our three levels, elementary, middle, and high school. We're looking at bus contracts. Mr. Chevenel and I have been working with 3 vendors actually, and talking about kind of proposals and looking at that, and we're averaging about a 7% increase in those. So that's kind of a big driving force in our budget. We had a very nice deal in our last bus contract. That deal is coming to an end at the end of this year. We have to negotiate a new deal. We'll be doing so this year. And then we're looking at about $30,000 for a new van. We've had our vans have lasted about 10 years. They're up there in mileage, and we want to maintain a good, adequate service for our students as they move back and forth to job sites and to different programs for our most needy children at the high school who start their transition plans. We need to transport them locally, and we use these vans for that. Our out-of-district placements, of course, is a major cost in our budget, and we're maintaining pretty much where we are with a slight decrease even in those numbers. We've gone, bless you. In our projected for our district costs, we're going down to 1 or 2 students in that too, which is nice over the course of the 5 years that I've sat in this chair to talk about budgeting. We've gone down about 10 students, which is nice to say, because those are sometimes big placements, and as those down, it's good things. You know, that's been happening. You'll see, though, in the budget, and this is one of the questions, but I'll talk a little more about it, is there's fluctuation. And you'll notice in some of these counts, there's huge fluctuation between our elementary, our middle, and our high school numbers and our district placement. I ask when you look at it, as I try to do, look at the overall number of those 3 combined, because kids move from program to program. And as we have an upper elementary school and we go to 6th grade, our district placements often 6th grade starts middle school. So although if they would have been here, they would have been in elementary school they're considered middle school in some of our district placements. So it often throws my numbers with pretty steady jumps and fluctuation in those. But if you look at the overall bottom number, when you add those 3 accounts together, we're staying pretty steady in that. And that was my hope to do this year. So we have again this year. There's often a balance between trying to keep the students in district and in really trying to keep our programs here and not put them out of district. But there's a misnomer out there too, and I need to talk about it. I talk about it each year, that we have to keep kids in our buildings. Often there's multiple service providers that we need to have. We have teachers of vision, and we have teachers of blind, and we have board certified behavior analysis, and we have school psychologists, and we have specialists that come in to consult with them on multiple. We have feeding specialists. We have a lot of services for some of our students that we need, and often those multiple service providers, you'll see my related service accounts. They're high because we have multiple service providers who come in to keep kids included in our programs, and those are part of my budget. So I wanted to also just highlight that. And again, when we're meeting FAPE and least restrictive environment, the team does that. And I need to reiterate that again. And they take multiple things into account. And again, they always seem to have the students' optimal learning environment and best interest in mind when they're doing so. So overall, that's my review. And then I have a few questions that I will, any first questions about the review when I'm there? Okay, I'll start with some of the questions, and if it spurs more, please ask. So my first question is from Chair Barnes. It says, with the increase in support staff wages per MESA agreement and in staff account adjustments, how are we achieving a savings of $4,800 in the paraeducator salaries at Master Elementary Schools? This year, we're under a new agreement. And with that new agreement, Matt and I and Linda Hastings spend some time making sure we have all the paraeducators in the right place in the budget and the right line items. And we've got to a point where we've had a lot of turnover in some of these buildings. There's two buildings. It's really we saw it at Master Elementary School and the Upper Elementary School. So it's kind of the same answer for the first two questions. We're similar in that. And when you have people who are here for a long time, their rate increases each year. The more education they get, and they go on their step, and they move forward and increase. But then when we hire in that contract, we hire at the lowest rate. No matter what their outside experiences are, things like that, they hire at the lowest rate within that paraeducator contract. And that's a huge savings sometimes for someone where we have a 20 to 25 year veteran leave us and a new person come in. There's a big savings there in those accounts, and that happens throughout the year. Right now, can we project who will be leaving, who will be coming next year? No, we take our best guess, and we use the current salaries right now, and we roll them over, saying that they would exist till next year, and that's what we do in that account.
If I could
Sure.
add in. This is one of those items, as John had mentioned earlier, that you have to look at kind of as a whole. So when I take all the paraprofessionals in the district, regardless if they work for MES, Reed's, Thornton's, the Upper L, the middle school, high school, the actual increase was 2.91%, 2.19%. So the contractual increase was a little around 3%.
3%.
Okay, so because of those people who are turning over, John had mentioned there were a couple of senior people who retired, and sometimes there's some shifting of this para worked at this school one year, now they're working at the other school the next year, and so the bottom line was the percentage increase wage-wise turned out to be, around 2%.
Okay. No, because the question was for MES it was 4,800,
Right.
in staff savings, and for Muse it was 23,000. So that looked like a very big number, and a lot of people would have to change for that to be.
Yeah, and it's seriously,
lot.
it would be a lot. And there's you had the middle school going up 22,000. You had the high school go up 38,000. So high school went up 4%, middle school went up 4%, but the Upper L, because of the shift, and these are people turning over and then changing positions, that went down to 3.6%.
So could some of it
So-
be because they stayed with the student and went from
It
Muse
could
to
be,
middle
yeah,
school, that kind
yeah.
of thing as well?
Yes, that
That
is, and especially in this year, we've done a lot of training, and I've talked about it around the board about becoming registered behavior therapists, and I've talked about that before, about really putting people some intense training and working with our autistic population and our behavior population. And in doing so, and also we had some kids that needed signing and needed some other things that were specialized skills. So in this year, more than previous years, we've probably done more movement with, if, for example, if we had open positions leave, we moved some people, then hired at the other building, moved the position over and hired another building.
I have Cinda, then I have Zev.
Okay, I just have a question regarding that. So we have like 163, it looks like, paras in the district. But the question I have is really maybe more of an HR question, and it's if we're always hiring at, I would say, the lowest entry point, right? How do we keep up with the times in order to be able to recruit people for fair market value? Because what the situation I think you can get into is, or we can get into, or anyone, is that if you start to bring someone in as inflation goes up, then you've got other people that have been kind of bumping up the ladder, where someone can come in. You know, how do we, are we keeping up? Is it a reasonable?
Well, this is, if I can start and John can finish, this is less of an HR question and more of a what is done in collective bargaining. Because unlike teachers, where you can look at prior experience, if they worked 15 years in another school district and they have this degree, they can be hired much higher on the scale coming in. But regardless of the amount of experience you may have as a paraeducator in another school district, or a custodian in another school district, or a maintenance mechanic in another school district, because they're part of the Merrimack Educational Support Staff Association, when you come to join us, you always start at step one, regardless of that. And has that hindered us in attracting people in certain of those groups? I would say absolutely. Is that something to be maybe talked about the next time we do negotiations? Perhaps it is, but that's another discussion we'll have at another time.
I mean, I would just say, like, after 10 years goes by and, you know, if you've got people coming in at that same rate, then it's may not be market value any longer.
Well, they would get like the adjustments based upon the 3%.
It would continue to bump.
So it would continue to bump at the rate in the table. But,
Okay,
so
all
you're not
right.
going to start. It's not like not the same number every year.
Raises everyone. That's
Yeah.
actually what I was getting at. Is it
Okay.
is everyone bumping up, or are you getting to a spot where it's stagnant?
Gotcha. Okay. And Zev?
Yeah, so my question, my question was, you said that you've been hiring people at the lowest possible rate, like this last year, and that's why we saved money. Are you worried about losing some of the intangible benefits of having teachers leave that have been with the school district for a number of years?
So this is really just the paraeducator contract in my budget, and that's what I'm talking about. Not the professional teaching staff. I'm talking about the paraeducator staff, and it's a contractual thing, as Matt stated. It's really not about that we choose to hire them at that. We have to. That's what the contract is, and the negotiated contract is. We don't have another option on that.
And we're in year 3 of a 3-year contract going into this coming year right now. So
Yeah, but I also want to add in, having negotiated some of these contracts, remember that once somebody comes in as a para, they start going up the tables. So somebody who's been here 5 years gets paid at a higher level, and with the benefits of the contract, just like with the teacher's contract, you hope that the benefits want to retain them in the district by paying them more, by giving them the right benefits and things like that. It's only the only downside is when someone leaves and you have to replace them, they start at the bottom again. But a teacher or a para that's been with the district grows with it through time. So.
okay.
So I'll move on to the third question,
Yep,
and it
perfect.
was, based on the increased regulation standard regarding ESOL, do we see any additional resources to improve the student performance with our ESOL served population? And this is a line item that's a supply line item, and it currently has a budgeted line item of $1,000. And so the answer is we won't see an increase in this line item for this year for that happening in this upcoming year. And that we also have a federal grant that works with the ESOL population that we're part of a collaborative and with Goffstown and Claremont and ourselves. And we have federal money that we can tap to meet the needs of those students. Currently, we share it amongst these districts, and we're able to, if we need funding for a child or for a program, we're able to tap those fundings for that. Dr. Mark McLaughlin really oversees the ESOL and how that happens, and we communicate about supplies and things that are needed throughout the year.
I brought that up because that came up a few months ago and Mark presented, and we for the first time, I think we actually missed the benchmark because the benchmarks were raised. And we were always above it, and now we were just slightly below it. So were there any adjustments that needed to be made that needed financial support? So that was really the question.
The change that you refer to was, most districts every district was subject to the same change, and many districts suffered the same result that we did. But as John pointed out, I mean, between the federal 03 and what we do in our district to support and John's 1,000, we feel very confident that we have the resources we need.
Excellent, thank you.
And the next question was, please provide information on the actual transportation cost to charter schools this year and what options we have if we don't fund this in our budget based on the historical lack of using these funds. Well, this year we currently have one student over the students that we have. We have multiple students out this year in charter schools from our office of special services. We oversee multiple students right now, and we have one student currently that has transportation. And how that works typically is, I'll do a little more explanation of this, is based on the Public Law 194B. It requires us to fund students who are in charter schools who have special needs. It's a cost of our district. The unique part about this is not something we placed in or we planned for as a district and as a team. How we place all students is team-based. And charter schools are something that parents have the right to place in. And when they place them, basically the current services they were receiving in our school, we have to provide at their campus. And that's what happens. So I give that background because we have one student right now who was currently in our system who moved to a charter school. And we, by law and regulation, need to provide him transportation. However, the parent at this point has opted to transport him himself, so we're not tapping that fund this year at all. However, it's still in there. I have to provide the funding for it in case tomorrow I get the phone call and saying, yes, I want transportation, because it's in his IEP and we have a legal requirement for that.
But there's an emergency fund if it wasn't there as well, correct?
I have other funding sources, yes. Emergency fund is still available if that's the question. But yes, there is a funding source for something like that. Or there's district transportation we have to elementary, middle, and high too. And if those aren't expended, we would certainly, Matt and I would talk to say, if it's an elementary student, is there a place that we could look there, and where are we with those funding and that choice of the year? So yes is the answer, that there are other funding sources we could tap if we needed to be, but by law I have to, as I said, because it's a requirement of law and I do currently have it in IEP, I need to place it here in the budget.
Okay. Cindy, did you follow on with that question?
Just a clarification. So with charter schools, if there's a student that goes to a charter school that needs special services, then as the home district, regardless of where that student is, inside our district or outside our district, but in the state of New Hampshire, then we provide those services. Now, for busing of regulars, I would say typical students, we would be responsible for busing those students if they go to a charter school within our district, but not outside our district.
Correct.
But in the case of special services, then we are responsible for busing the student to a charter school or any private school anywhere in the state.
Just not private schools, charter schools.
Just
charter schools. So there is charter schools in Salem, and there's some up in Greenland and Deerfield, and there's, like I said, we have all over right now. So yes, yes, we could find other sources for this budgeting, but the opportunity for where we currently have students is what I would say that's why it's in here as a placeholder to say we need to provide this if it does come forward.
And the same thing for services. It would
Yes.
need to be a public charter school, not a private school.
Yes.
Correct. Okay, thanks.
I shut myself off. Then the next question is, please provide this year's actual cost for parish support in charter schools. If the cost is in line with 2015-16, why would we not want to reduce the amount to $15,000 closer to the line item than current using this account? There's two accounts, so I think that I just want to clarify that there's two different accounts we pull from for related services and paraeducators. One was a personnel account, and that was 100-1027-41-811406 is a personnel account. And then the other one is 100-2163-41-82306, and that one is a other supports for charter schools, and that's a related service account. And those are the two accounts that we pull when a child needs support outside of our district into a charter school. So currently we have about $20,000 encumbered between those two accounts for services of kids in charter schools right now. And I think we'll continue this year with the people we have in place. We don't have current personnel right now from Merrimack going to charter schools. That one student we had it for, he progressed very well. The team said they didn't need it this year. We pulled that back. But we do have related service providers, speech, OT, and we have some assistants, teaching assistants that's needed, which is para support, but it's done at their, for example, they have hired people, and we pay a portion of that to provide this service. So, for example, a child may have an IEP for an hour a day of para support, paraeducator support. If the charter school has personnel that will do that, we'll cost share with another district versus us hiring a full employee to send over there. I'll work with the other related districts that have children going to that school, and we'll cost share a portion of that person. I can't use a personnel account for that, so I use a related service account for that, and that's why the two accounts. So to your question, could we reduce it? You can always reduce it, but if we have a move-in, we have another kid go out tomorrow, that cost could be there. I'd have to come back and either go to the fund or do something different to look at to do that. And again, it's I just know within this year, I'm estimating about $30,000 out of those. Is what I'm proposing for next year, because that's what I'm estimating I'll spend this year, and that's consistent with a trend of where we've been. And then Board Member Schneider had a couple of questions, so I'll move to those. So we're looking at the co-curricular line items, and these are the new ones that I came on November 21st and talked about co-curricular activities. And Board Member Vice Chair Schneider asked, with these co-curricular line items for paraeducators, in all three schools, it's total about $50,000. What's the background on why are these now needed, and what is the impact of not having them? Well, as I talked about in my presentation, we really got a Dear Colleague letter back in about January, a Dear Colleague letter back in 2013. Really, we've been building from then, and I think that I gave examples on that night too of really the amount of activities that happen in a given month at the high school, and they're everything from band to unified sports to Lego League to robotics to multiple events that we have students involved in right now. And I think that it's increased, and it's a wonderful thing that it's increased. And I talked about that. We have a lot of kids that are really involved in our schools, and it's starting as young as elementary school. And like many of our programs that happen, we become fully integrated in a lot of our programs, and kids have grown up. That's their culture. That's what they know. They're accepted to be involved, and that's the wonderful thing about our school system, that it's happening. And I think as I'm seeing that trend increase, that's why they ask for the money now, because I see this continuing to increase. We talked about, the numbers with the paraeducators, it all goes together. So those numbers are going up by 2%. We've been fortunate over the last few years, and Matt and I have talked a lot about this, about okay, well, we have this person, we have to pay a little bit of overtime because they're going with this child to band camp for a week. Okay, well, can we cover that with our paraeducator line item? Do we have enough money in that account to be able to do that? Yes, we do. That's getting tighter, as you see. So my concern is we don't have enough money, and here I am with a personnel account that I have to be under a personnel account. So there's some pieces of that if I add that 50,000, that's an opportunity to say, yes, we can fully fund what we need to fund by regulation. So that's why it's there now, and that's why it's important now.
So does that mean that you're going to be hiring additional people to do this? It's just like a per hourly?
Yes, it's a per hourly rate, and we do our best to keep it under overtime if we can, use multiple paraeducators and train them and cross-train them with students. That works most of the time. Some of our students have individual or specialized needs to take individual training and specialized training. So it has to be those 1 or 2 paraeducators that we've trained in that way to be with that child. And that's sometimes where you run into overtime, hence the extra money to support that. Next question comes to talk about our line item for tutoring regular high school. And these are tutoring line items that are typically developing regular high school students. And in the 2015-16 expenditure was significantly higher budgeted that year for 2016-17. It seems to match what's being budgeted for 17-18. What's behind the relatively significant increase? Well, I would say multiple hospitalizations, mental health needs. We've had a few injuries. This is one of those accounts, again, you have it, you hope that you don't utilize it, but again, we've found over the last couple of years we're tending to have more requests for tutoring for students who are out of the building for a number of days or returning after a long absence and needing to maintain and get caught up on their work due to an illness or due to things. And by statute and law, again, we need to provide that for students. The next question was around our psychological testing line items. And it was, in psychological testing items are increased across all school levels. Are there increased needs for number of students requiring these testing, or are the costs of higher and all of the other driving factors? Yes to all, Andy, I think is your answer to that. There's a thing about psychological testing and about all testing that we need to maintain the most current version of the test. And I won't get on my soapbox about the testing companies and what happens with them, but I see Naomi nodding over there knowing this, that we are WISC 5 right now. And I've watched from WISC 2 to WISC 5 in a very short time happen. And these tests run close to $2,000 a piece, and I'm buying 8 sets of them. So you can see where the costs are just increasing. And as they upgrade, we have a year pretty much by statute and law to get the current version, to be using a current version to do that. So we've been maintaining that and trying to maintain that. And along with this, and I don't know if we realize that in this line item is where a lot of our consultation with our psychologists is coming out of right now. And that's because we don't have a personnel line item anywhere in our budget for school psychologists. So this is really where we use consultant fees, and when they come in to first to do the evaluation, but then again present the evaluation and consult with the parents or with the child at that point. So that's also embedded in this funding, and those costs are, so for all of those, yes, across the board on those. So the next item, the next question is about placement for 16-17 and about some of our out of district placements, and we look at this, and it's really tuition for non-public outside New Hampshire elementary was the line item we called up and looked at, and it really is, and it's really multiple line items across my out-of-district placements. And it shows the same placement, 16, 17, 17, 18. However, the budget amount from last year is significantly less, where in 16, 17, the placements were both known for budget time last year. And are they being paid for in the school district this year, even though they were not budgeted for last year? So I think what I'm asking, to take a shot at this, I think what you're asking here is, were there kids that came up after I sat at this table last year that I had to pay for, and then I put in the budget again for this year because they're there? And was that the correct? Thank you. And the answer is yes. We have had a flow this year. I think Marge and I have had many conversations about, well, we have a move-in, and they are residentially placed, and welcome to Merrimack, and they're here, and we're hoping that we can work with the family, and the child's very successful, and that's the law and the regulation. So we own the child once the parents have residency in our town. We've had other kids that have moved out that were significant. We've had kids that have aged out. We have kids that have progressed amazingly. We've brought back in. We've had kids that DCYF is involved. There's been court involvement, and they've been placed by the courts, and we cost share with the courts on residential and out-of-district placements. So it's been fluid, I would say, at the least. And in that transition, Stacy Conti has come in as my new out-of-district coordinator, and we've been on the road seeing places and introducing her to some of the students. And there's been kids that haven't been successful in certain programs, and we've moved to other programs. And that's kind of the ebb and flow of the district placements. And Stacy Conti has a very hard job and works very hard at it to make sure that our most needy kids are well cared for and in good environments where they're learning on that line item.
Right. Just to clarify, is that when you did your budget last year, you assumed that you were going to have students. Obviously, this is a relatively expensive out-of-placement that it showed being out of placement last year and this year, but yet the budget didn't reflect it. So my only conclusion was that it was somebody that came after the budgeting cycle, that you picked up a part of the year, and then you had the full year at the much higher rate. So
that is correct.
Okay,
yes.
Great. Thanks.
And my question on that same line item is, there's two items that are listed. The Lighthouse and then the Perkins School for the Blind. Are they, is that one student tuition, or is, like, let's say the Perkins School, is that for one student, that line item?
Yes, there's two different students there in that
students.
elementary out-of-district placement.
And
yes.
one in each different?
Yes.
Each school?
Yes.
And what is, just out of curiosity, when we look at the out-of-district placement, I've heard of the Lighthouse, but I haven't heard of the Perkins. Like, why would a student go to one and?
One is for severely impacted students, and it's probably in the country, one of the very strong institutions that deal with kids that really have low functional skills.
Okay.
And these are kids that really aren't able to feed, aren't able to a lot of times have feeding issues, a lot of times have severe intellectual dysfunction. This is really some kids that have a lot of impacts, some motor, physical disabilities. These are more severe and students.
Okay, thank you.
And Andy had another question too. Is it similar to other questions in departments, given the run rate on $5,000 less last year? What were the negative impacts reducing funding, and what benefits will be achieved by fully funding this program again? And that was under my computer software account last year. If you remember, it was $5,000 was a reduction in there. And I raised this last year and probably the year before too, and this has been kind of one of those things that I've hoped to put in place, but again with budgetary restrictions and choices we have to make. And as Marge talked about as a team, we gave back to the family, as you would say, a little bit, and gave something. Here's where one of the spots I gave last year, and it was really, I'm trying to get to an automated kind of using iPads versus paper protocols for our using the WISC in our psychological testing. I'm trying to get to a point of being able to do that where it's computer based, and the evaluator and the student both have an iPad in front of them, and they're able to do the test right online. It automatically scores it. It gives red flags on if a child did poorly on a certain assessment. It leads them into different assessments. It's much more probably cost effective in the long run, much less time consuming. We're not paying as much consulting fees, and it's better for the child. I think that it leads us down a path of better evaluation, I think, and I'm just hoping to get there. And that $5,000 was to purchase that software that would run off those iPads. And that's what the money is there for. So it will enhance our programming and our ability to be able to do better assessments is the question to answer that.
And the reason I brought it up is because, and this isn't you, this is across every budget, is because we did a cut last year, what was the impact of not doing it, and what's justification to bring it back? Because there's a belief that when you get to a lower run rate, you survived last year, what was the downside? So that's, it's mostly informational purposes, but.
Yeah, and I think the downside is we probably paid more hours, to be honest, to have school psychologists do assessments, and that's probably the downside of what it was. So I'm not sure if we saved that.
So I was going to say you probably didn't save the $5,000. You probably cost more, right?
Exactly.
And that was one I think we had a hard time with when we were making that cut, because we knew that it would get you the results that you need to be able to be more proactive with the child. So that was when we had a tough time swallowing. I will say that stood out. So I'm glad we're committed to it again this year.
And then what options were considered for the district-owned van replacement? Do we consider leasing versus purchasing? And where are we ongoing maintenance costs for the two vans captured? It wasn't clear on where the budget maintenance items are. Are those called out in the maintenance budget? I will let Matt answer the second part about the maintenance budget, but I'll start, Matt, on this one, and then you can go. Matt and I talked a lot about this, and I think I shared that idea about let's go lease a van, and Matt looked at me and he says, are you going to sign a 10-year lease? Because that's how long we're going to have this van for. And I said, no, Matt, and that was kind of our conversation, that because of the longevity of how long we keep these vans and the low amount of maintenance we've had to do on the vans that we had, and I think it was kind of an interesting little side note that I didn't at first, you don't know everything when you start a new position, and I didn't know I owned those vans. I thought they belonged to maintenance because every year they left and they got inspected and they came back and they showed up in my parking lot and they looked great. And to find out Peggy Clement at the high school, who's in charge of our Get Set program, has been overseeing them for 10 years since we've got them, and really takes care of them, gets them serviced along with what happens, and has really been self-sufficient about keeping those vans. They've been that much of a, I guess, less of a burden on my office and what's been happening, that they were somewhere there, and Matt and I talked about them. We talked about when we purchased them, and talked about options, and that's where we came to today to ask for it to purchase another van, to purchase one this year, and then probably be back a year or two for another one, because they both are getting up there in miles.
Yeah, as far as the maintenance of these goes, a little bit, most of it's subsumed in the maintenance upkeep of equipment budget, in the maintenance budget. It's been really kind of minimal as far as the maintenance goes, oil changes, etc., inspections. We haven't had anything major happen to these vans yet at all. So there's been nothing really of the sort that called out a separate line or anything. So they're basically subsumed in the maintenance budget, although they're not called out specifically.
So I've been around the budgeting block for a few years now. This is the first I was aware that we owned vans that we used for this purpose. So what I think I'd like to request, and I couldn't, and then once I realized that, I went to try to find out where the maintenance was captured for those vans, and I couldn't find it in the maintenance budget, because all the things that were itemized in the maintenance budget were more the maintenance vehicles, things that Tom uses and stuff. So I guess the request I have is, it would be good for the board to understand what vehicles the district owns and where the maintenance is captured generally, because if they're going to wear out and we're seeing two vehicles here, are there others we don't know about, and how are those captured and stuff? So I guess that's more of just a request.
There are no others that you
So
don't
this is it.
know about.
This is okay. So
If you're
it's not a cache of vehicles in the back lot.
Well, the prior boards have talked about the vehicles, because we were budgeting for them back 10, 12 years ago. And we weren't on the board, and everybody else wasn't on the board 10, 12 years ago, so we haven't had the opportunity to talk about them.
Right.
So there are no other vans that we have that are phantom vans going on here. These are the only two that you have not heard about them because we haven't had the opportunity to discuss them. And the maintenance repairs of them have been so minimal over the years, it really hasn't warranted its own separate line item. Sometimes we can take them out of the high school transportation lines for field trips or something like that. But it's really small. It's not significant.
It's just for keeping track, you know, if we have a good visibility to the maintenance, because it's not just, you have things like registration, you got other things that you do, I guess. Assuming there's a registration for van.
There's a registration.
So
Every 3
it would
years
just be
we have
good
to register.
I mean, if it's truly just these two and then the maintenance ones, okay, that's fine. But
Yeah.
at least if it's just captured someplace in the budget, just so we know.
We could
you
spell- we could
itemize sort of the
spell it out.
vehicles and stuff like that.
Yeah.
That would just, wouldn't catch us because it caught me by surprise. So, you know, and the first question is, well, could we add it to the transportation, you know, for the busing, for example? But you just explained it as bringing them to workplaces and all over, which doesn't make sense for a bus. So now understanding what the transportation's for, it opened a lot of, or answered a lot of questions just in that, so.
So wasn't the stealth fleet just like a Rogue One? So, little Star Wars humor.
Thank you.
Michael?
Mike, oh, sorry.
Did you have a question?
I actually, I know that I have two questions in regards to some of the increases and decreases, but I think that you've actually already answered them with the changes of the students from one school to another and stuff like that. So I'm not sure if you need to answer mine. I think I actually got my answers from your discussion already.
Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Are there any questions outside of Cinda?
I was just, it's not necessarily a question, but we do have some new people on the board, and I wondered if you could take a moment to just explain the catastrophic aid process. I know a number of the line items had costs submitted for catastrophic aid.
So we're able to, if it's 3 times the cost of what the state determines as an adequate amount, like a funded amount for what it costs to educate a special ed child in the state of New Hampshire. We get a rate every year and what that number is. And then if it exceeds a certain amount of money, 3 times the amount, we're able to apply for federal funding to get reimbursed. And we have the staff in my office works all year round to keep track of kids that may come close to that threshold. So we have actually notebooks, and we go through and we keep track of every service they get, every possible thing that would touch them: busing, paraeducator, speech pathologist, school psychologist, occupational therapist, physical therapist, board certified analysis, anyone that would come in contact with them, and the cost and the rate it would cost for that person to work with them. And we track those throughout the year, and we do that pretty diligently. And then any kid who's out of district, we also track those costs too. There's an in-district and out of district you can apply for catastrophic aid for either one of those. So we track those, and then we apply for as much as we can get reimbursed in within a year. It comes, Matt, I'm going to need some help with this one. The cycle of it, we get it the following year. Is that correct on the money, the way the flow comes? We apply. It's within the calendar year, then we get the money actually is reimbursed.
Yeah, that's right. Could be, if you have let's say a large spike in this year's operating budget, you will feel no relief from the catastrophic aid that you collect that's associated with the large spike in your current operating budget. So it comes a year in arrears.
Yes. And then it goes back into the general fund, and then ultimately turned back over to
Right.
to the taxpayer.
We always try and be a little prudent with the estimate because the regulations of catastrophic aid, they change, the audit requirements change, everything changes in an effort to make it more difficult to attain. So we have to remain vigilant and fight the good fight, and we get what is basically due us every single year, but we always try and be a little bit conservative on that revenue estimate just in case there's another regulation that's passed that all of a sudden you can't deduct any transportation or something like that. I mean, there's been some various regulations that have hindered this as far as coming into our general fund, so.
Any other questions or comments from the board? Seeing none, you have the most complex of budgets every year. So many factors and federal, et cetera. So we thank you for educating us every year on this and taking the time. And you're off the hook as well.
Thank you. Happy New Year, everyone.
Thank you. Happy New Year. And now we're going to start lightening up. This is a very content-rich part of our program, and we're on to item number 6, which is the planning board's response to the school district's capital improvement plan for 2017 through 2023. And I will turn the mic over to you, Marge.
Thank you. So on December 20th, in this very room, Assistant Superintendent for Business Matt Chevenel and Vice Chairman Schneider sat together at this very table, and Matt predominantly gave a presentation about the school board approved capital improvement plan for the 6 years. And there was a lot of exchange back and forth between the planning board. And I think one of the things that helped in the deliberation is Matt had taken photos of all of the major capital improvements. And so,
John, your glasses.
So I think it was a very informative presentation, given the fact that I was witness to it. I will say that Andy offered insight from his perspective, having been a graduate of Merrimack High School, I will say, or the system, but especially the high school. And so I think they gained a lot. And when they finished, they then gave us back a rendering. The thing that I'm pleased about is that we went ahead and, you remember the board assigned some rankings to the various items, and I'm pleased to say that the planning board concurred, meaning that the planning board felt that urgent should be attached to the HVAC unit on top of the roof at the high school, which is a major need for us, and that would be for the budget 17-18. And in the 18-19 year, the board has approved the hope that we would come forward with a new SAU Special Services building, and they marked that as urgent. All other items were marked as necessary, so there was a concurrence here. What I found very interesting is that there were also 2 specific recommendations that were offered up by the planning board. The school board's not obligated to follow those, but simply they were put out there to be investigated. And one was the consolidation of the Special Services SAU offices. The thought was that one option that needs to be fully looked at is the notion of adding that, this consolidation onto the high school. So in other words, it would be the elimination of the current greenhouse as we know it, and it would be an extension off of that. Now, over time, the planning board, our elected planning and building committee, has looked at that, but it's almost now going back and just taking a further look, because that was specifically said, and you can see that as one of its recommendations. And the other is that the planning board is very pleased that the school board is considering sidewalk specifically for O'Gara Drive and just overall pedestrian improvements, because, as you know, there's a town center committee, and Matt sits on that. And so anything the school district can do to enhance pedestrian walkways is looked at as a positive thing. So we are always glad to go before the planning board, because it gives us a chance to further tell the public what the school board has got on its horizon for 6 years. And so I considered this to be, for one who witnessed it, a very positive experience. Perhaps Andy and Matt would also like to weigh in.
Andy?
Yeah, so one of the reasons that I went is because, having watched the planning board sort of debate this in the past, one of the things that was never really there was the school board's sort of perspective as to why we did what we did, sort of what the background was. So I took the opportunity, as Matt was going through, to offer some sort of insight as to what we've talked at the table, like our decisions around breaking things into warrant articles to give the voters a choice and stuff like that. So in general, I was just sort of there to add some color and, as Marge said, some history of like the windows at the high school have been there for 40-some years and the reason they're so low. But it did catch, Marge did just mention about one of the things they wanted us to look at was essentially when she talks about adding on to the high school, the proposal is take the green building and blow it up or tear it down, put a trailer someplace else to put the SAU staff, and then take the three-story, right, and then take the three-story high school addition that was done years ago and extend it out, and then occupy that. Now, I don't know whether that specifically had been looked at in the past, but we all know that the cost and standards of building a building to a school standard is much higher than what has been looked at for the building we've proposed for the SU SPED. So I took the action to carry that back to the planning and building to have them look at it as part of their analysis of the different options for the SAU SPED. This came from Lynn Christensen's the one that really pushed this, saying that she said it in the past, she wants to say it again, so I'll carry it back to the planning and building, but my just gut feel is the cost would be significantly higher to do this than what we've been talking about in terms of it. So that was the only takeaway that I took from the meeting, is like it startled me a bit that that was recommended. So
And I think the other thing that we would have to consider is when you add something to an existing building, what codes have changed that building wouldn't meet. So you take the whole high school and bringing it up to current day code.
Right.
That's a good point.
Right. It's you know, you've got, for example, we've talked before about when you build a building like this, you've got to isolate the special ed and the other stuff from the general population. Well, does that mean if you build multi-floor that you need an elevator that's unique to that addition, even though there's an elevator right near it? Do you need to build a unique one? And then what's the requirement for access and things like that? So, I mean, you're absolutely right. Bringing it up to code beyond what was there when it was built.
I think one of the reasons why I wanted to really point this out, and I felt that Matt and or Andy would, but I wanted to, is because literally if you're not speaking and you're just watching the dynamic of the evening, is that one of the things we've talked about, whatever the board comes forward with, it's about marketing it and getting people to buy into the concept, whatever it be. And I just feel if this isn't fully explored, that it's going to be difficult because the people on the planning board, some of them have been on for a very long time and they're influential, and I just think if they have asked for it to be fully investigated, that it needs to be done, or I think it'll just be a trip up. And so I'm just saying, I'm very glad that Andy has already spoken to the Planning and Building Committee, because I think if we just discounted it as being just not proper, or I just don't think that will work or whatever, we need a person to do this as their life's work, to take a look at would it be a viable solution or not, and if not, why not, I think. So.
Yeah, if I could just add, one of my first duties when I first arrived here was to complete that construction of the three-story addition. And there's a number of unique things that are involved in that because it was a design-build construction. So you'd have to take a look into and have that taken into account. You'd also have to provide for a secure entrance. And at the end of that addition, there is an exit that goes out that's a fire exit that's at the end of a 100-foot hallway that you can't just block off because it just won't make sense. So the only thing we could do to try and come up with some sort of design would be to actually hire an architect, and we have the old blueprints in Tom's office that could look at the existing structure and have them see if they could match something onto that building to take advantage of it in some fashion. So that's kind of where we're at with that investigation. I just can't call up a guy and get a number. It's going to have to take a little work.
And honestly, when you're talking about tagging on to a building that probably isn't at optimal efficiency as well, how do we tie it in? Do we make it so? Do we do it?
You couldn't tie the
Yeah.
I know that the HVAC system in that building. You couldn't tie it into existing
So you'd have
because it's a
to do an
plenum
independent
system.
system.
It's not ducted. You'd have to build a whole new system for that.
Mike?
I think Annie kind of brought up the point about the codes, or someone brought up the code. But instead of hire an architect, why don't you just start there and figure out what would be needed to upgrade code? And you might just see your cost right there relevant for the whole.
Marge?
So I think unless the board says otherwise, it's Matt and I have already talked about what probably needs to be done is a part of the investigation, but I think our thought was let's get further along in the budget process so we don't have confusion going on here, and just even for the Planning and Building Committee to realize that it's got to be an option. If they hadn't thought it needed to be an option, needs to be an option. And then once we get a little further down the road, we'll come back to you and ask to spend some funds that we will identify to put toward this effort, because clearly the Planning and Building Committee would need to have an outside agent or agents come and speak with them about it. And codification is one of the things that we need to investigate. But this is one of those where we need an expert or experts to come from outside in to give us
Kind of
some insight.
along in the same way, we had, his name was Tibor Farkas, if you remember that name, from Marinese Associates, who looked at the upper elementary school as far as moving a special services there. And he went through the entire, he did a presentation, he worked with the planning and building, gentleman was really good, and he specifically addressed the code issues as far as the staircase that you would need to block that you can't block. So there's a lot of things like that, then the upgrades that would need to happen to the building. Fortunately, at the high school, we have upgraded a lot of the fire alarm systems, et cetera, but who knows where that would bring us. So that would be something as a first piece. But however, that being in 1819, I'd hate to have a lot of discussion about it at this point in time, because it would be a distractor for us, and then people would probably get the misimpression that this is something that's going on the ballot this year, and it's not.
Fair enough. No, and I definitely think that they have some other, planning and building has some other timed charges anyway, so we'll wrap them up and then give them kind of a new one, which makes total sense. So we'll be talking about it again probably after this budget's already voted on. So are there any questions about the planning board meeting and where we're at? Okay, so we'll go on to item number 7, which is the response to the proposed New Hampshire School Boards Association resolutions. In consideration of trees, I asked you to bring your copy if you had any questions. The way this is laid out and how we've done it before is we have always gone with the assumption that we will go with the recommended Board of Directors position unless there's something that stands out that we would want to take a differing opinion on. So if it's a proposed resolution and it's proposed with an alternative resolution, we assume the alternative resolution unless we as a board feel otherwise, and I think it's only happened once in my time on the board, probably about 3 years ago. But does anyone have any questions or concerns about the resolutions as they are being presented? Seeing none, what we'll do is we will assign Naomi to go to the delegate assembly on the 21st, and she will represent the board's positions as supportive of the resolutions as approved by the boards of directors. Excellent. And then we're on to item number 8, which is the approval of the December 19th, 2016 minutes. Do I have a motion to accept? Made by Andy. Do I have a second? Made by Cinda. Are there any edits to the minutes? Seeing none. All those in favor of the minutes as presented signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? None. Abstain? 1. The motion carries 401 with Mike abstaining as he was traveling for work. Hopefully he had a great trip. Or he got stuck in a snowstorm, which does not sound great. And now we're on to item number 9, which is the acceptance of gifts and grants under $5,000, and that's over to you, Matt.
Thank you. This evening we have from Alliance Energy, LLC, 15 Northeast Industrial Road, Bradford, Connecticut, in the amount of $500 to Merrimack High School, specifically to support the science department. That is it.
Excellent, thank you. Is there a motion to accept? Andy?
I move that we accept the grant for $500 from Alliance Energy with our sincere thanks.
Is there a second? Seconded by Mike. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, none. The motion carries 500. Now we're on to the consent agenda with Mark McLaughlin.
Thank you. And consent tonight is the following teacher nomination: Daniel Leone, school counselor at Merrimack High School.
Do I have a motion to accept the consent? Cinda?
I move that we accept the consent agenda as presented.
Do I have a second? Seconded by Naomi. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, none. The motion carries 500. On to item number 11, other. A, correspondence. Is there any correspondence to come before the board? It was a holiday season. Michael, you snuck one in.
I'm trying to remember here.
In the blizzard.
Like, where do I talk about what? So I had a individual reach out to me in regards to the workload to students. Is this where I'm supposed to say this? Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Basically, the homework being allocated to students seems to be quite a burden, where it is taking quite a long time for the student to actually complete the time. So I think this is something that I personally would like to look a little bit deeper into, as it I see it with other people that I've talked to too.
Okay. So it could, if you find that you want to put it under new business, let us know. We can make a formal agenda item out of it. So if you're there, we can definitely bring that up.
I have a little homework to do first, which
Okay.
I think will
No, when
actually
you're
help
ready.
with it, and
When
then
you're ready,
I'll
we'll be
bring
ready.
it forward.
Oh, wow. That was tough.
It will be, but I think it will be relevant.
Yeah. Andy's green light was off, but he had a pun. So if there's no other correspondence, on to comments. Any comments from the board? I just have one. I just want to remind the community that our next board meeting is a budget hearing, and is this Thursday, the 5th. Because this room is being used, we're going to be having it at the Mastrocola Elementary School. We will be reviewing their budget: Reeds Ferry Elementary School, Thorntons Ferry Elementary School, Merrimack Middle School, Merrimack High School, and the district-wide budget. And then we will discuss what we've discussed so far, kind of have a recap and see where we're at based on the information that we've gathered. Just kind of get a feeling of where we're at. Again, it's at Mastrocola Elementary School, which is the building behind the upper elementary school where you may be used to voting. So just keep going past that entrance, and to the back side is the second half of the building. It will not be live because we don't have access to live broadcast from that facility. So it will be 7 p.m. in the all-purpose room at Mastrocola Elementary. And all, of course, are welcome and encouraged to attend. So that's all I have for comments. On to item number 12, which is new business. Any new business to come before the board? Seeing none, we will close new business. On to committee reports. Were there any? There are committee reports. Wow. Andy.
Well, it was sort of a breakfast non-committee meeting, but
Okay.
the, what was it? Safeguard, that's what it was. I couldn't remember. Safeguard, so I think I mentioned last time that on January 19th, which is a Thursday, at 6 o'clock at the O'Leary Adult Community Center, there is going to be a community forum on just general community outreach around drugs, alcohol, just the general themes around Safeguard. What we did is this: we had a planning meeting to make sure we had understood the speakers we were going to have, some of the vendors that were going to come in to share their resources and things like that. There will be I think there's a poster describing it that we'll provide. We'll maybe put on a link on our website or something that Safeguard does. But we just had a meeting to prepare for this, and again, it's Thursday, the 19th of January, at the O'Leary Adult Center, starting at 6 o'clock.
Cindy, I see your lights on.
Yeah, I just have a side note. I haven't received that poster yet, but I'll follow up and make sure that it's distributed to administration and to our fellow board members, as well as.
Is it a flyer that we could put on our website as well?
Yeah,
Great.
I've asked for it electronically, so we can, not only can we put it on our website, but we could distribute in social media and some other.
Excellent. Sounds good. So, are there no other committee reports? There is, Mike.
Seeing that I missed the last meeting, this was before the last meeting, I think that this one went on. It's Parks and Rec. I'm sure most of you are aware that the dog park is open. So I just wanted to share that. I think that's a great accomplishment to the town, and I think that the individuals that helped raise that money should be commended for what they've done. So, thanks.
Good stuff. And on to item number 14 then, which is public comments on agenda items. Mr. Delude is respectfully declining. And so we will close that and go on to item 15. We'll sign the manifest. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn, made by Mike and seconded by Andy. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. We are adjourned, and thank you and good night.
Because that's what we're supposed to do,
That's right.
okay? So that's what I'm looking at, because you mentioned all those housing projects that might start, okay? Now, the